Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Hello, welcome back to The Alt Left. Today's date is December 16th, 2020, and thank you all for joining us again. I am your host, Chris. With me, of course, as always, Matthew.
Hey, everybody, welcome back.
And the good Reverend Dr. K.
Good evening, everyone.
Glad you're here with us. Today we're going to be, as usual, talking about the current state of affairs and some political issues we've got going on with the right. Always try to stay vigilant about the lies that are being perpetrated by that side, because those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Today on the Alt Left, we're going to be talking about this transition of power and the dragging of the right and the Trumpster cult not letting this go. There's been an usurping of democracy being attempted, and even though I may not be the proudest American in the world, I happen to believe it's probably the most un-American thing that the flag-waving crowd has done in quite a long time.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, this is something that even I'm not shocked, but I absolutely did not expect to see this level of just fascism just springing up to and from every corner of the right. And there also seems to definitely be a struggle going on. Like there are center-right conservatives now going against the party, and some are even leaving and joining the Democrats, who are really the true reasonable right-wingers in this country, because they recognize their party has just gone off the deep end. It's pretty crazy out there right now.
I can't say that I was surprised at all. With the level of cognitive dissonance that is going on in this country, especially with like QAnon, Texas trying to or wanting to secede from the union, or saying that they're going to, but they've been threatening that
Yet
forever.
again.
That's not going to happen.
To be fair, populist Texans do that when the weather changes too fast.
And again, California's had its own stint with that from the left too. Like that was a big move in the last couple of years that keeps trying to gain popularity as well. So it's on both sides.
No, I'm into it.
I'm into it too, to be honest.
I'm with you too.
I think Washington, Oregon, maybe Nevada.
I'm not sold on Oregon. It's pretty much
Why
the most
not?
racist state in the country.
It is.
But definitely Washington and Hawaii can join us. Oregon's on notice. I don't know. Portland can come. I don't know about the rest of the state.
The problem with going Washington, not Oregon, California, is then we're split up, and that's just not a good thing.
I don't know. The British Empire pulled it off. I think we can do it.
Tell you what, here's the compromise. After we secede, Washington and California invade Oregon from north and south, kick out all the racists, we purge, we're done. Everyone wins.
I think that
so. 12 people in Oregon.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine.
And to anybody listening in Oregon, I just want to go ahead and let you know that I'm joking. It's less than 12. Your state is a racist garbage pile. It's the only state in the country that was founded as a whites-only state. And if you don't like that opinion, do better.
Or check the history.
We don't do that. We're Americans.
Yeah.
To be fair, I have actually got to give it up to Portland. Even though people, places like, it's not perfect. Things like Portland PD aren't great. The Portland protests that have been going on, I mean, over the last year have been fantastic, but especially right now with them fighting eviction. I mean, they've literally been, throwing rocks at the cop cars, coming in, setting up barricades, absolutely forming human chains. The Portland crowd on getting people not dragged out of their houses for private profit has been I honestly have been impressed. I haven't seen anything like that. And I live in Los Angeles, which has a pretty effective BLM left-wing movement. There's been nothing like that here. We've shut down some freeways. I got tear gassed, but that was about the best that's happened. Portland has really been stepping up, and I got to give credit where credit's due. Portland's been putting together some good praxis.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I definitely feel like for the first time, true progressive and leftist ideals are gaining a foothold in this country. And I think what you were talking about right now is a good representation of that. It gives me hope that we might actually have a shot going forward.
We'll see. Unfortunately, anytime that happens, that gets severely clamped down by the people in charge. So
Yeah, that's
time will
true.
tell on that one.
Everybody keep your peepers open. Won't be long before that socialist Biden starts having his way with the country.
God, if only.
Oh, damn, I wish I could vote for that version of Biden.
Yeah, right. I just I keep hearing about this far left extremist Biden. I just keep waiting for him to show up.
Oh, yeah, you mean that far left Biden who's stacking his cabinet with centrists? That guy?
Centrist. He got Pete Buttigieg in there, and Buttigieg is a goddamn right winger.
Oh my god.
Like,
But he's gay.
Exactly. He's gay, and his husband is lovely. His politics are garbage.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Same old policies, but now with more women and people of color.
Right? It's almost like tokenism might not work. I mean, it's like I look at him putting Pete Buttigieg up as transportation secretary, and I'm just immediately reminded of when Trump was like, "Look at my African American." It's the same thing. He's like, "Look, kids, I'm hip. I don't believe in malarkey. I like the gays. There's several of them now, right?" It's grandpa trying to play nice at Thanksgiving is what we're watching here with him. So one of there's been a few facets that this and cognitive dissonance is a very good way to say, because it really is. It is absolutely a failure to accept this as an idea, and it's also wishful thinking. I mean, this QAnon thing is just amazing because there's zero evidence for any of it. This originates on a 4chan anonymous messaging board where literally anyone at any time, I could right now hop onto 4chan political and declare myself QAnon and be like, Donald Trump is preventing pineapple on pizza in Milwaukee to stop the gays. And everyone would be like, oh my God, that's amazing. Oh, QAnon really knows what's going on. It's this most ridiculous out there. I mean, this is worse than turning the frogs gay. This is worse than Alex Jones crap, because at least when Alex Jones goes out there and tells you to put your tinfoil hat on, the chemicals are making the frogs gay and crisis actors are at these schools, at least you can see who's doing it. You can see the douchebag behind the curtain. With this QAnon garbage, it's anyone who feels like calling themselves that at any time and spewing garbage. And it's being taken as fact, as some kind of whistleblower from the inside.
Yeah, to me, it's absolutely insane. And they believe the dumbest shit. And you see some of the interviews that are done with these people, and they're just bonkers.
Well, and it's proven wrong every time. I mean, the whole Pizzagate thing came from QAnon. And that one dude literally stormed a pizza parlor with a gun that didn't even have a basement.
Yeah.
I mean, this was all done because after Hillary's emails went gone through, several people were talking about going to a pizza place. They're like, oh, that must be code for having sex with babies for some reason. The guy goes to it. They don't even have a basement. There is no democratic child smuggling cult. And everyone just goes, oh well, anyway, he's still right. And it's like, it's Earth 2. It's a whole nother planet.
Yeah, cognitive dissonance, man. It's a hell of a fucking thing.
It really is. I mean, and again, it's taking form everywhere, from Giuliani giving speeches outside of a dildo shop to, holding, what he calls hearings, which is really just, 15 white dudes who can't find a clitoris holding a meeting in a Hilton,
It wasn't even a hearing. It was a town hall.
It was a town hall with a handful of people who don't understand how reality works. It's the most asinine thing you've ever seen. And another one is the lawsuits. Every case keeps getting thrown out. Every single one gets thrown out of court case after court case after court case, and there's no evidence, but the people believe in it regardless.
Well, they do, and that's not 100% true. They did win one case out of 51 cases. So that one case was actually to extend the deadline in Pennsylvania for mail-in ballots, where they basically stopped that. But then it was actually overturned later. So they didn't really win that even. But most of these cases, like all 50 of the other cases, we're alleging basically that there's been mass voter fraud that has taken place, and there's no evidence for it. Most of these cases were actually withdrawn because of the apparent ineffectual nature of the case, meaning that if the case had been heard, that the number of votes that the case would actually have affected would have been irrelevant to the outcome. So little votes may have been changed that it just wouldn't matter. Other cases were simply dismissed or struck down because of lack of evidence or merit of the evidence that was provided in the filing, meaning that there basically just wasn't any evidence. And that lack of evidence is it just keeps happening over and over and over and over. And that goes back to that cognitive dissonance with these right-wingers that are still holding this faith that something is going to happen that's going to allow Donald Trump to stay in office on January 20th. It's just not going to happen. We had the Electoral College vote, which just happened. Texas's Attorney General Paxton, he filed a case basically saying that the election boards for Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin implemented pandemic-related changes to the election procedure. Basically, they changed how they were going to allow people to vote, and Texas didn't like it. And so 14 other states decided that they were going to sign on to that as well as Trump. I was about to say,
yeah, weren't there a bunch of AGs from a ton of other states that there was signed on to this nonsense?
There was literally 14 other states that all signed on to this. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, and West Virginia.
So the intellectual heavy hitters.
Yeah. And it was all of the state's attorney generals all signing on to that, as well as Donald Trump himself, who signed on to it. And the Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuit, stating, and I quote, "The state of Texas's motion for leave to file a bill of complaint is denied for lack of standing under Article 3 of the Constitution. Texas has not demonstrated a judicially cognizable interest in the manner in which another state conducts its elections. All other pending motions are dismissed and moot."
Which is legalese for get the fuck out of here.
And keep in mind, this is a right-wing stacked Supreme Court. Is two of which are from or were appointed by Trump himself, right?
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah. This is actually the reason why Trump wanted to push through RBG's replacement.
Yeah, so because he knew he was going to have to challenge this.
He knew that he was going to have to challenge in the Supreme Court, and that's why he's been going on TV saying that he's disappointed with the court system of the United States, and I don't know how they could do this to the people of the United States. And it's like, they didn't do anything. They did exactly what they were supposed to. They basically said that Texas doesn't get to tell any other state how they get to govern their elections. The federal government allows each state to decide how they're going to vote and whether they're going to allow people with mail-in ballots, how long after the election date that they're going to continue to count those votes, whether they have to be in by that date, or all of those things. They get to regulate themselves, and no other state gets to tell them how to do it. So that's the reason why it was outright dismissed.
That was the problem, was they didn't do anything. And Trump was, let's be honest, this guy has spent 4 years making sure that every ounce of the federal government becomes his personal plaything. He doesn't like the facts of COVID. What does he do? He guts the CDC and forces them to put out bullshit data. He forces through Supreme Court justices. He appoints a crap ton of federal judges. He puts Bill Barr, the biggest clown to ever hold the AG office, in charge because he knows Bill Barr will be his little toady. He has made sure that people in every position of power do whatever he says. And so I think he was really expecting the Supreme Court to just cow down to the president and be the president's plaything.
And Bill Barr apparently resigned days ago
He did, which
after
it's a weird
the Electoral
move.
College.
I don't know
The
what
thing
the
is,
goal there is.
I honestly don't think that he resigned. I think that he was told that he was resigning.
I don't know about that though, because Trump has made it almost a habit of letting go of people in the most unprofessional and spectacle-like way possible. Like half of the people he's dismissed only knew about it because he tweeted about it.
No, I think Bill Barr legitimately left because they're getting into a place where we can actually start talking about treason, and Bill Barr was like, "This is too much even for me."
And that's what you also have to remember. And we've talked about this several times now, but like it bears repeating. So the majority of Republican politicians are pieces of human garbage. We've said that before, saying it again. But you also have to remember there is going to be varying degrees throughout that. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Okay. So while we can acknowledge that this one instance he realized shit was getting too hot and made the right choice, and in no way is giving him an attaboy of any kind. And let's just be clear about that. And you'll hear us make notes about this. But Barr is also a piece of crap, and we need to say that kind of up front too. Just because he saw which way the wind was blowing and got out before the heat got too hot.
So, again, and a lot of these Republican lawmakers and elected officials tend to honestly be the worst of the worst. And there's a good point to be made there that just because Bill Barr jumped ship like a rat off a sinking vessel doesn't make him a hero. It doesn't make him a good guy. It doesn't mean he came around to the right side. He needs to be held accountable for the awful shit he's done. Would you agree?
100%. 100%. As does anybody. There's something like 126 Republican senators that backed this stuff too, and there was some blustering from the left about how they were going to not let them hold their seats in Congress, which is not going to bear any fruit because, as we've discussed, Democrats are largely spineless wimps. They're not going to follow through on any threat they make.
Yep.
But I wish they would, because that is absolutely treason territory. These people are willfully holding up the democratic process to keep in place a demagogue who lost.
Yeah, you're completely right on that. And that's because we need to face a truth, about America. I've seen so many news stories where literally newscasters are like, "This is insane. This isn't America." And I was like, since when? This is exactly what America is. I mean, you got to remember, one of FDR's biggest failures was he thought it was too controversial to back an anti-lynching bill. Like, that was in the 40s. It hasn't been that long. MLK was assassinated by our own government in the 60s. This guy who couldn't take a bus over state lines without getting beaten and arrested was assassinated before any of his dreams came true in 1968. It's been a generation. So to have people say, "I don't understand this white supremacy," and this usurping of government, it's like we've covered this in previous podcasts, that no party has more guilty of fraud in elections than the Democratic Party. And the U.S. government commits, they want to clutch their pearls at Russia influencing elections. What do you think our foreign policy has been since the middle of the 20th century? We've meddled in every election we can. So to sit here and say this isn't America, this is America. You just don't like it because now you're against it, because you don't like Trump. And so all of a sudden, now these sins are bad.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And I think to kind of loop it back and tie it to a previous episode, in a lot of ways, it mirrors the same way people approach religion. It's, you want all the good stuff. You want let freedom ring and America the beautiful and all this good shit. The moment you have to face the fact that there's a flip side to that coin, and the flip side is a hell of a lot uglier than the other side you've been staring at this whole time, you freak. Nobody wants to be wrong. And that's what it boils down to. It's everyone wants to be fucking Captain America. Like, everyone wants this view that this country is a country version of Captain America, the superhero. And we're fucking not. The truth is, we're probably the villain for most other countries. And Trump, as we've said before, he's a symptom. He's not the disease. He's a symptom. And what he's forcing you to do is deal with the disease.
And like a symptom, he's the loudest and most visible portion. But if that's all you focus on, nothing gets cured. Unfortunately, a lot of the things, look what Joe Biden's doing, right? With this cabinet filling. So we got Kamala Harris as his VP.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got Buttigieg. How many other Democrats that he ran against who resigned and immediately endorsed him, and he's now paying back personal favors to?
Oh yeah.
You can say that, like, well, Obama did that with Clinton, but it's like, no, he fought Clinton till the bitter end. Clinton did not stop the campaign halfway through. You gotta remember, it was Buttigieg, it was Elizabeth Warren, and it was what's his name, the dipshit from Texas.
I don't remember.
And the dipshit from Texas, they all dropped out on the same day and endorsed Biden. Like, it was this coordinated effort to drop out and support him, and now they're all getting cabinet positions one by one. Like, if that is not fraud in an election, what is? But we're okay with it because Joe Biden did it, because a Democrat did it. That's fine. Trump pays back favors to everyone, and it's corruption. The Democratic Party does it, and it's just good politics. And just like you said, we don't want to be the bad guy. And it's like, you have to recognize that even if your side is doing it, it's wrong. And the Republicans haven't been able to get this, as they want to accuse the Democrats and the leftists and all that of election fraud, when the only ones committing fraud is the right wing. And especially with these court cases that Kay's talking about.
That was Beto O'Rourke, by the way. O'Rourke.
Beto, that's right.
Ah, yes.
That's fine. But would you agree, Kay, that these, I think, personally, my opinion is that these court cases could absolutely be construed as an obstruction to the election?
Oh, I absolutely think they could be construed as that. I think they are obstruction. The blatant nature of them is absolutely astounding to me. I just can't understand how people, Republican or Democrat, don't see that trying to use the courts in the nature in which they've been using them is absolutely deplorable and shouldn't be allowed and shouldn't be done.
Yeah, trying to find some legal justification to circumvent the will of the voters is insane.
Yeah, like I said, Texas, it was basically trying to say, we don't like how these 4 states are conducting their elections, so we're asking the Supreme Court to just overturn it, make it null and void, and the Supreme Court gets to decide who their electoral votes go to. And I'm sorry, but Joe Biden got 306 and Donald Trump got 232 on December 14th. That's just what the facts are. There was even a group of people in Arizona, the Arizona Protect the Vote. They created a facsimile of the certificate of ascertainment, which basically is just the document you take to the government and says that these are the electors and they're going to cast their vote, right? And after they did it, they proclaimed, we seated before the legislatures here. We already turned it in. We beat them to the game.
Yeah, I love how it's like musical chairs rules now. No democracy. It's whoever gets the chair first, so, can put in some fake ass paper.
They gathered a group of people, right? They gathered their own 11 electors. They went to the government. They went to Washington, D.C. They went into the Capitol, turned in this forged document that was notarized by this Melanie Hunsaker, and apparently she's a notary that works in real estate.
And I want to take a real quick, take a pause here. The best part of that is that it's done by a notary. Like, there have been lawyers throughout this process involved who have been really questionable, but they couldn't even find a lawyer who would put their bar on the line for this. It was a notary who worked at a real estate firm. Now,
Well, but her husband was one of the proposed electors that they sent, and apparently he's a big Trump enthusiast. So they turned this paperwork in, and it was never assumed to be anything but fraudulent. So they knew that it was wrong. They didn't accept it, and the electors that the GOP collected and sent there cast their votes exactly the way that they were supposed to. We actually had 0 faithless electors in this electoral college vote back on December 14th.
well, also remember, the Democratic and Republican, all parties get to pick their electors.
Yes.
If you think for 1 second the DNC wasn't going to make sure there wasn't a single faithless elector this time.
No, but I agree with you. But even in the past, there's been electors that have been like, nah, my vote's not going to matter, so I'm going to do it just because I can.
Yeah.
Like I talked about, the vice president that has a vote for president
Mhm.
as an elector, college vote, because the guy who was casting the vote was drunk. That kind of stuff happens.
Yeah. But they made damn sure in this election it wasn't going to fucking happen.
Oh, absolutely. But it's still something that's very common to have happen, is have 1 or 2 faithless electors.
I think it's also important to mention, with all these attempts at, stopping the results of the election, flipping it back, this should be no surprise. Trump, from day one, from his rhetoric to his actions, Trump has been nothing more than a dictator trying to seize power. And it's important for our listeners to understand there's very few things that have been stopping him. One, which has been the biggest benefit, is he doesn't have majority support. Yes, he does have a lot of people supporting him, but they are the minority. They're vocal, they're organized, but they are the minority nonetheless. Number 2, in order for a dictator to be successful, they have to have a good team behind them. They have to have pillars of support and control that are loyal. Trump has backstabbed literally every single person that has come in, that's been under his employ. Like, the closest people to him, Steve Bannon was a good example of this. He was one of the biggest props for Trump during the election, giving him all kinds of media coverage, having his back, promoting him. And Trump tossed him like a day-old sack of potatoes. So you can't be a dictator without those pillars of support. And another big one is the military. And Trump trounced all over the military for pretty much almost all 4 years he was in office.
But the thing is, having the majority isn't even, and I'm going to go out on a strange limb here, and say that I don't even know if having the majority is that much of a virtue. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad he doesn't, but I don't know, a majority of people deciding who gets fucked, I'm not even that big of a fan of pure democracy. I mean, pure democracy is the reason why we have a nation that committed genocide against Native Americans and exists on stolen land. That was democratically done. And so I agree with you. He trashed his pillars of support, which is important to seeing why his downfall was so hard. But I don't know. I guess I'm not a purist when it comes to democracy. I actually think democracy is inherently flawed, and it is flawed against the minority at all times. And so I am not happy, as much as I'm happy to see Trump lose the majority support, I'm never happy to see the majority take out the minority. And that's a flaw in modern democracy.
But did he ever actually have the majority?
No, he has never had, not his supporters, not his approval rating, never has it been a majority. But I said all that to say this: the thing to always keep in mind, someone with even 50% more intelligence may not have had the issues that Trump had. That's why I think Trump is especially scary. I don't think there was ever really danger of Trump succeeding in any of his stuff. However, if Pence was president, if any one of these other people that's kind of, basically Trump level, but with some amount of intelligence behind them, I don't know, because they know how to play the political game. They aren't going to be bombastic, and they aren't going to stab people in the back. That is why this is so important to remember, because as we've said, if what we're predicting is true, Biden's presidency is basically going to mirror Obama's. And what we're going to get, like we just said, is the same old policies, only now with more women and people of color. And what that is going to lead us to is the very next Trump waiting down the line. And this time it may not be Trump. It may be someone just as evil, but 3 times as smart. And that person can absolutely seize power and become a dictator.
Well, and that's terrifying, to be honest. This country was founded on the idea that it could be governed by its people and that would change on a regular basis. Especially with Washington. Washington, he served 3 terms, right? They wanted him to serve more. They wanted him to be a dictator. But instead, he was like, no, we don't want to do that. What we really need is for presidents to change so that this country can continue to advance itself. And what we have, if that happens, is it stops. The country will stop advancing. Over the last 50 years, we've stopped making things in this country. We've stopped a lot of industry. We're not the leader in hardly anything anymore. We lead in like 3 things. And they are not technology, they are not industry, or they are not manufacturing.
One of them is people per capita that are incarcerated in prison.
Well, yes, of course. I didn't want to throw out those same numbers again because they're the same ones all the time. I just wanted to point out that the last 50 years where we've been fighting for, equal rights, where we've been fighting for higher wages, we lost something in that same time. We don't have any better quality of living. We have smaller middle class. We have a larger lower class. We have the largest amount of millionaires and billionaires we've ever had, and those continue to grow daily.
Well, and the important thing to remember too, and I think this is very telling, and it echoes a lot of what we've said in previous episodes. The people championing this pull to fascism, this pull to a dictator, this pull to a demagogue as a leader, these are the very same people that will beat their chests and claim to be the most patriotic Americans. And they believe it. Make no mistake. They believe that they are 100% the ones fighting to keep our Constitution sacred.
Yep. And that is, I think, the greater threat. I think we can talk about legal battles and we can talk about Trump refusing to cede power. But I honestly think the biggest problem we have is those people. It's these right-wing militia members. It's the Boogaloo Boys, the Oath Keepers. A lot of these people claim to be patriots, and they're actually terrorists. And we need to really start acknowledging that. Like, what a big problem is the Oath Keepers, right? You probably heard of them. For those that haven't, the Oath Keepers are America's largest lobbying group for the legalizing of marriage between cousins and eliminating reading requirements to pass high school. And one of the things they've done is refuse to recognize the Biden administration. And for anybody listening, I was full of crap. They do advocate for marrying your cousin, but that is not their purpose. They are actually a militia of the right wing. One of the things these Oath Keepers has done is be so vocal about absolutely refusing to cede to the will of the people. These patriots, right? Stuart Rhodes is the founder of these nut jobs. And he was interviewed by The Independent not that long ago. And I got a quote here from her. He said, anything he's talking about Biden, anything he signs into law, that's not how he said it. Anything he signs into law, we won't recognize as legitimate. We'll be very much like the founding fathers. We'll end up nullifying and resisting. Nullifying and resisting. These are people who pride themselves on stockpiling arms and look for confrontations with the government. Hell, actually, the Anti-Defamation League has the Oath Keepers described as a heavily armed extremist with conspiratorial and anti-government mindset looking for showdowns. Like,
Wow.
that's the Anti-Defamation League. Like, I'm not making this shit up. That's who these guys are. These are a gigantic group of rednecks that spawn multiple areas who are literally looking to build a new confederacy. And they're not alone. It's not just these bastards. It's everyone. Look what happened in Michigan, right? You got this plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer. Adam Fox is the name of the guy who led it. And he was living in the basement of a store. And he went online and in person, and he got support from this other militia. They were called the Wolverine Watchmen, which, it's funny. It's always a bunch of 50-year-old overweight white guys who have a third grade reading level who call themselves the Wolves. But yeah, the Wolverine Watchmen, and they got together and started having, meetings about hot cousins and that kind of thing. And they built this little terrorist training camp in the woods, and it was very, very white guy Al-Qaeda chic. And, they were doing things like building Molotov cocktails and planning bombing runs. And then when they were going to, it's not even like they were going to like kidnap the governor and like hold her for a ransom. And like, we want $86,000 for pepperoni pizzas and my freedoms back. No, they were going to execute her.
Oh, yeah.
They were going to kidnap the government and execute her for treason because she had a mask mandate and was shutting down restaurants during a pandemic. For listening to science, they were going to execute the governor. And, one of the guys in the group who this has come out during the case against them, his name's Daniel Harris, and he actually texted in their group text while they were doing some of the finalization of their final plans. And his quote is, "Have one person go to her house, knock on the door, and when she answers it, just cap her. At this point, fuck it." Like, at the end, they were starting to give up on the idea of being able to kidnap her, and they were just going to assassinate her.
Well, and didn't Trump basically just ignore the whole situation?
Oh, I wish. If Trump had done that, it'd be great. No, Trump said they're great guys.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah, Bill Barr,
great guys,
one who pretended he didn't know this was going on. Trump actually spoke about them and said they were great people.
Well,
and remember, this group sprung up after Trump was saying "liberate Michigan," tweeting in all caps. Like, this was a response. This guy called sedition to action. And a group of white nationalist terrorists came together to assassinate and kidnap and execute this woman because they didn't want to wear a mask. This is the tyranny we're talking about. And so court cases are one thing, and anti-mask mandates are one thing, and Rudy Giuliani's dildo plans of meeting people are one thing. But when you got a bunch of crazy fucking rednecks with guns struggling to hike up the stairs, but once they get there, they're going to kill you, that's a fucking scary move, man. And again, so we've got these nut jobs. We've got the Oath Keepers. And then let's not forget about the Boogaloo Boys. Now, the Boogaloo Boys is mostly a toothless movement, but it's nationwide. It's an online movement. And some of these nut jobs are legit. And they are absolutely trying to have a second civil war and overthrow the government to establish a white heteronormalcy government of terror and horror. And you guys remember the Chaz, the Seattle Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for those of you who don't know, is after the George Floyd murder, during that beginning of the second wave of BLM protests we had, was in Seattle, they got pretty hardcore. And they established the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or basically they threw the police out of their own precinct, blocked off a couple blocks around it, and kept it as an autonomous zone, free of government and police action. And as much as that might put some hairs on the back of your neck and say, whoa, this is kind of scary, it actually worked out really well. I mean, this is one of the few times I am not an anarchist. I have a very close friend who is, and he and I talk back and forth. I'm a socialist, he's an anarchist. We agree on 90% of things, but I got to give it to the anarchists on this one. They pulled it off. This place was filled with peaceful protesters. They had free food, community gardens. They were holding speeches, doing movie nights and teach-ins. People brought their kids and felt safe. It was this zone of basically community outreach, and it was actually wonderful. And then, of course, we all know it ended in some shootings and some violence, and it got cleared out. Trump blew his top every day about it. But what we don't talk about is, how did that happen? What violence was it? And a lot of it was actually caused by right-wing infiltrators. So the Boogaloo Boys had a lot of chatter online about this, about moving in and infiltrating it because Trump had a big problem with it. And he did, after the mayor refused to shut it down. He was tweeting about it nonstop. And I mean, although the Seattle Police Department and the fascist in chief and his supporters who gobble up his bullshit like a dog licking peanut butter off his dick like to blame it on the protesters, it's just not true. When the Seattle Department of Transportation crews tried to actually remove the barriers, the concrete barriers blocking it off, they were stopped by people who were sitting on the ground and lying on top of them. Nonviolent civil disobedience is how they did everything. And everyone talks about this one big shooting that happened, and that's why that Chaz was so bad. But the main victim, his name was Dewan Young, or Dejan. It's Dejuan. So I don't know. It looks Dewan to me. Could be Dejan. I'm not sure. I think it's Dejan. But Dejan Young said that he was fleeing the sound of gunshots, where the first person, a teenager, was shot dead. And then when he was accosted by 4 men who dropped the N-word at him and then shot him. And his quote here is, "I'm not sure if they're Proud Boys or KKK, but the verbiage they said was, 'Hold this N-word down,' and then they shot me." That's the shooting victim, the one who survived. Eyewitness accounts had unmarked SUVs showing up and shooting into the autonomous zone, and the Boogaloo Boys were talking online about doing that exact thing. But none of it's ever discussed by the police or by our federal government as that being the case. It's just, there's violence, and it's a shoo-in to start tear gassing and finally getting the push to push people out.
Well, and none of it's prosecutable, apparently, because I'm sure that there have been no arrests of these people that profess to want to do these things, and then they ended up happening, but nobody knows anything about it. So
when the right wing does this, it's not when Trump's in office and we've had the Republicans in power, the right wing is never held accountable for this. I mean, remember the federal officer David Patrick Underwood, who was shot in Oakland in May? Pence went on. Pence held this big conference about it. He was talking about it. What he failed to mention was that the guy who was the trigger man who shot the police officer was part of a far-right extremist group. But Pence just said his death was a result of the riots. But it was a right-wing nutjob that shot the cop, not a leftist. We all know about Kyle Rittenhouse, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, that piece of shit.
Yeah, that guy's from Illinois, and he went to Wisconsin. He went to Kenosha for this.
With a gun.
Yeah, well, he described himself. I mean, he self-incriminated. He described himself as a militia member of the Kenosha Guard, right?
Yeah.
He crossed state lines with an illegally obtained weapon to shoot people. Now, you can't claim in any way, no matter what happens from that point on, it's not self-defense. You were looking for a fight. You drive a car drunk, it doesn't matter if the other guy ran the red light. It's your fault because you drove drunk.
Yeah.
You cross a state line talking online about how you can't wait to hold this down, and you go looking for a fight at a protest. Nothing that happens is self-defense at that point.
Well, and the right wing has deified this kid.
Oh yeah,
and they've tried to raise millions of dollars.
He had a $2 million bail. They got him out on bail. So 15 minutes before the first shooting, right? Police officers document they drove past Rittenhouse and the other armed civilians who were claiming to be protecting this car dealership, right? Now, just so you know, the car dealership never asked for this. The owner has said he doesn't know who the fuck these guys were. They just showed up to protect a car dealership. The cops drove up and offered them water and told them they appreciate what they're doing.
That's because it's a good cover story.
Yeah, and then the right wing touts, footage of the multiple people who are, when the shooting happens, we have this camera footage of literally multiple people, and it's, to be fair, there was I think it was 4 people, 5 people chasing him down. One guy hit him with a skateboard. They chased him down, knocked him down. He turned around, shot them. And the right wing's telling, say it's self-defense. A mob came after him. What they're failing to mention is that mob was chasing him because he shot a guy in the head at the car dealership, left him to die, and then ran.
Yeah.
The crowd was chasing a guy who just murdered someone over the defense of property that wasn't even his. And then as this happens, the police, literally this riot patrol in tanks and armor, are sitting 1 block away. Gunfire's going off. They don't fucking move. And in fact, when you see him walking towards the police, he walks with his hands up towards the police vehicles, rifle on his back. Bystanders, you can see all the video here. They're pointing at him. It's like, this is the shooter. This is the shooter. And they
do nothing.
Wave and cruise on by. One of the cops even hops on a PA and tells them to move out of the way as they're going to go take care of the people who just got shot. I mean, they're giving him water. They're giving him a pass. This is what leads to the real big problem here. Is it's not just, we like to think of this as for, bear fuckers out in Tennessee who are the problem. And it's not. There's not just a lot of people in this country who are the problem. The authorities are the problem. We have a president who condones these guys, calls them good people when they run people over at protests, cheers people on when they plan to gun down the governor of their state because they don't want to wear masks, and the cops pass out water and shake the hands of these guys and then don't arrest them when they're shooting people. And then the right wing bails them out of jail and calls them heroes. There's this place called the Institute for the Research of Education on Human Rights. It's basically it's left leaning. It's not a leftist, but it's definitely progressive. You could call it liberal organization. And what they do is they track extremist groups. Think of like the Southern Poverty Law Center for tracking down nut jobs. And what they found is that right-wing vigilantes appeared to receive the support and approval of police. And this is just during this last year. And during the George Floyd BLM protest, is that the right-wing armed nut jobs got support or approval of the police in over 24 cities.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And the thing that disgusts me the most about it too is, we're talking about the authority, but also the media. When a white teenager crosses state lines with an illegally obtained firearm to defend property that's not his and murders people, even left-wing media will bend over backwards to talk about what a good boy he is. I saw an article on CNN that was talking about how he got good grades and he was active in his community and things like that. Whereas you've got people like Trayvon Martin, who was an unarmed kid who was stalked and assaulted by some piece of shit and murdered. And you've got mainstream media talking about trouble he had in school. It's like,
there's definitely a correlation of complexion.
Well, but there's also a lot of evidence of a lot of Kyle Rittenhouse's friends saying that anytime anybody badmouthed Donald Trump, that he would just go fucking nuts. Like, you don't talk about him like that, and just would bully people over this. There's something wrong with this kid. There's something wrong with him as a person. But I'm just saying, like, there's all kinds of evidence beforehand that he was there to do something that wasn't good.
Yeah.
He was there to kill people. He brought a gun. He was there to do something nefarious.
Yeah. But that's kind of what we're getting at too, is this country as a whole, from an institutional level, will bend over backwards to try and defend and protect people like Kyle Rittenhouse, and will swing the complete opposite way and bend over backwards to try and demean and deride victims like Trayvon Martin. And that's what we mean when we're talking about systemic racism. And people are like, well, show me an example of systemic racism. That right there, what we just talked about. This is why these things happen. And this is why, one of the reasons why we go after the left as well as the right, because the left is culpable in these matters. They contribute to it. They don't do it on purpose. I don't think anyone is sitting here honestly trying to say, oh, let's see how we can make this kid look good and this kid look bad.
Wait. I mean, unless you're talking about just on the left, because
Yeah.
The right
No,
absolutely
no,
does
no,
that.
no.
They
I'm,
go on
I'm
a
talking
cheering
specific.
spree when they found out a black kid who got shot had a speeding ticket at one point.
No, I agree. I'm talking specifically about the left in that matter.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, but like it's even in a weirdly passive way. Like when like Trayvon Martin, one of the things I remember being reported, and again, I'm sorry, I can't remember what specific news article, but I tend to only try to read the bigger, more mainstream ones because those are the ones that are a little more trustworthy, whether you're left or right. And we'll probably go into that in a later podcast. But the way they reported it was, and we've spoken to this person who say this, and this about him. They don't even have the courage to just come out and say it like a right-wing media will. They report that somebody else says this about this kid, and it's completely irrelevant to the fact that the boy was murdered. But they want to report that somebody that knows Trayvon Martin thinks that he got into a lot of fights.
Well, I mean, look at now I can't remember his name. The jogger that was shot, where the truck came down, they chased him down. It was like an old school lynching, and the news kept talking about like, well, was it trespassing? Because that wasn't his house. What was he doing? And it's like, okay, let's just say he was casing the joint. Let's just say he was out there with a saw, sawing the walls down, trying to destroy it to steal all their sweet, sweet lumber nails. You still can't murder someone for it. Like the worst case scenario that it could possibly be. And of course, we find out he was jogging and it was interesting looking. And there's video footage of everyone who goes on walks and jogs in that neighborhood always going in to check out the progress on the cool new house being built. But even let's just say none of that's true. And he had some nefarious plan to just trespass his ass off. You're not allowed to chase people down and shoot them for trespassing, especially on property you don't even fucking own.
His name was Ahmaud Arbery. And the reason I'm saying his name is not just because these kinds of things bother me, but when it comes to these murders, which is what they were, you need to remember their names. Their names need to be said over and over again. And I don't care how sick the "we just want brunch back" crowd gets from it. I want you uncomfortable. The only way this is going to change is if you stop giving shit about your stupid brunch and actually give a shit about the fact that minorities in this country are being murdered by people and getting away with it.
Yeah. And, the brunch back thing it's an analogy I use all the time. But, on that note, we need to talk about what does that even mean? Because people hear that and they don't think about anything. But what it really is that return to civility and normalcy, right? That's what people want. And that's the problem, is we just want some Democrat to come in and make everything okay again and work with the right wing and find middle ground and everything can be pleasant again. And old school normal pleasantry only works for suburban white people of privilege. Because guess what? Normal didn't work if you were black. Normal hasn't worked if you're a woman. Normal hasn't worked if you're gay. Normal hasn't worked if you're trans. Normal hasn't worked if you're native. Unless you are a WASP with money, normal sucks. And this obsession we have with fetishizing the return to this murderous normalcy we have is a problem. And I 100% agree with you, Matt. No, every single time, if I forget a name, you bring it in and you scream it. Like, we need to remember these people's names every time. Breonna Taylor's one that I'm glad people haven't stopped talking about her. A woman who was murdered by police and they got off scot-free every time. That's what happens.
Qualified immunity.
Yeah. Qualified immunity is a fucking crime. So are grand juries. Because if I go murder someone, I don't get to get off the hook because, I was at work when I did it. No. Qualified immunity is horseshit, and anyone who thinks it's a good idea is full of shit and a bootlicker.
Let's throw economics out the window. I don't think we should because there's some things in there that are even serious, but let's just stick with social issues. One of you out there, and again, we're always asking for comments and feedback from you guys online. Please do it. I'll touch base on how to do that later at the end of the show, but tell me what the compromise is. We're on the left. We think that if you're part of the LGBTQ community, you deserve equal rights. That means you can get married. That means you can own property. You can anything that a straight cis person can do, they can do. That's our position. The right says no to that. Where's the compromise? How do you compromise with that? It's, we want civil rights. You're saying no. There's no there is no middle ground there. This idea that we can just give them little bits of rights here and there so that you get to not worry about fighting or have to face the fact that this country is fundamentally broken.
Well,
I'm
or
sorry.
people who like to tout that we need incremental change. And it's like, well, yeah, incremental change is great when it's not your children being gunned down by the police. Incremental change is fine when you're allowed to marry, adopt children, not be fired from your job because of your gender preference. Like, that's bullshit. Or gender identity, like, regardless, or religion. You know, I mean, how many people have faced persecution in the workplace because they're Muslim? Happens all the time, especially in federal and governmental employment. Incremental change works really well when you're a straight passing cisgendered white man of the middle class. That's it. Incremental change is bullshit because while you're hoping for incremental change, people are literally dying. And somebody having to bury their child because they were killed by the authorities over the color of their skin, incremental change is not going to change that, bring back their loved ones, or make them feel better. It solves nothing except to appease the mindset of colonizers. And that is it.
This brings me to something else I want to mention too. And this is a little bit off topic, but I think it also needs to be said. There's an argument that's very popular right now, not just amongst the Democratic leadership, but I think in the electorate as well, about this idea of, oh, the left has a branding problem, specifically when we're talking about defunding the police, because there's this argument from the centrists that was a killer and it ruined a lot of Democrats' chances. All right. And that, if you just change the name to something that people will actually give a crap. These issues have been going on for fucking years. Do you know why defund the police? It's because everybody that's bothered to pay attention for the last, I don't know, fucking century in this country already knows what it means. We understand what's implied. The fact that those of you that think it's a branding problem don't is because you haven't bothered to take 2 seconds to learn about what's really going on in this country. If you did, defund the police wouldn't be a problem. The left doesn't have a branding problem. This country has its head in the sand problem. That's what's really going on.
Yeah, and a willful, and again, this is American History 101. This country has a willful, wanton disregard for the lives, well-being, and issues of people that aren't WASPs. Defund the police is scary to moderates, and it's scary to conservatives because they're on the receiving end of privilege. Not that there aren't leftists on there. I, for one, am a leftist with an ass ton of privilege, right? I am a white cis man in America. That's as good as it gets, man. But I recognize my privilege and I'm fucking trying. And I do everything I can to try to be on the right side of history. And when a person of color or a gay person or someone of any impacted community thinks I'm wrong, I shut the fuck up and listen for a second because I might be goddamn it wrong. And that's okay. And it's okay to evolve. It's okay to say, I thought this was a thing. Turns out somebody who's actually impacted by that I have no connection to this community, says this is a problem. So I should adjust my thinking and speech to that. Kind of like the Washington football team, right? Had this racist, awful name. And how many people are so upset that how could you change the name? And it's like, there's an impacted community who doesn't like their likeness being used alongside a racial slur for your football team to go up against bears and coyotes and wolves and Vikings. Like, go fuck yourself. You don't get to have racial slurs as team names and expect the community that impacts to be okay with it. And so that's the thing. It's like, sure, did I think it was a problem 10 years ago? Nope. I actually was unaware the R word was a slur. Found out it was because I listened to American Indian people who had a problem with it. Because that's what you're supposed to do. And so the people on the right are the ones who have privilege and refuse to see that privilege, don't want to acknowledge it, and the acknowledging of it makes them uncomfortable. So defunding the police, when you've spent your whole life saying they're big damn heroes, you can't admit that you're wrong. You can't admit that you have played a part in what has actually been terrorizing a lot of people in this country.
Well, and there's also a very common fallacy from the right where it's this idea of my life has been hard, therefore your argument is invalid. And it's a complete lack of understanding of what we're saying. And saying you have privilege does not automatically imply your life has been easy. What we are saying is that regardless of how hard your life is, you have had to face nothing even remotely compared to other people of color or minorities in general.
Again, you're right. It's not that your life isn't hard. What it means is that your life, like, okay, for instance, if you had white privilege, right? If you're talking about like white people have white privilege. That does not mean some white people don't have difficult lives. What it means is that your life was not difficult because of your skin tone.
Or because of who you love.
The point is, that's what privilege is regardless. Because again, that's not white privilege. That comes to straight passing privilege. There's a million different kinds of privilege. Recognize what you have, especially when people in oppressed communities tell you it, and take their word for it. And don't hold government organizations, whether it's the military, whether it's the police, whether it's the federal government, state government, they don't override that. And so, like you said, that issue with the defund the police, it's a conversation we need to have in this country, right? Because it's prevalent, especially now. It's always been a problem, but now it's on TV. Now it's being displayed for the world to see, and you can't hide away from it, which I think is why it's such a hot button topic now. Back to these BLM protests, there's a list of times where there has been major problems. During the George Floyd protest in Philadelphia, it was in June sometime. I think it was, I have here June 2nd. I'm not sure about that date. But it was in Philly where the police literally allowed a bunch of armed militiamen with bats to linger outside the police station past the curfew that they said everyone had to follow, and then stood there and did nothing while they then beat the shit out of counter protesters. At the same time, in Oregon, authorities in Kern County, I don't know if it was the sheriffs or the PD, they welcomed what they called local boys defending the community against what was gonna be Antifa showing up, right? And then, a constable in Texas called on members of a far-right paramilitary group, another one of these Oath Keeper motherfuckers, to guard a hair salon from threats of looting and arson because he had ties to it. There was this famous, I'm sure it went viral, you guys might have seen it. It was a cop in Salem, Oregon, who during this time, he was filmed asking a group of armed white guys and Trumpsters to disperse ahead of the curfew just so they didn't look like we're playing favorites. You remember that one?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
Well, and he was telling them specifically, like, to go here and do this or go into this place and just go inside and it'll be fine.
Just so we don't look like we're playing favorites. But playing favorites is the problem. There's this guy's name's Michael German. He's an FBI agent who spent a long time in the 90s working undercover with white supremacist groups. And there's this amazing quote by him that I have here. He says, when law enforcement reacts leniently to far-right militant organizations, those groups tend to believe any violence on their part is authorized. Consistent leniency has created a monster that's going to be hard to contain. And that's what he said very recently about policing in this country. And that's a big problem. We have a problem with the police aligning themselves with terrorist organizations.
And there's something I think that needs to be said with regards to that too. It's starting to get addressed. It's nowhere near where it needs to be. But if you're a cop that's listening to this right now, and most importantly, if you're a good cop that's listening to this right now, there is going to be an overcorrection. When this finally hits, the pendulum is going to swing in the opposite direction, and you're all going to take it on the chin.
I could not disagree with you more. In what way is there going to be an overcorrection?
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that the majority of people in this country are going to do anything than what they continue to do, which is deify the police. They deify them. They hold them up and they expect them to do what they're supposed to do. But what they're actually doing is holding everyone down.
The police do exactly what they're supposed to do. The police are here to maintain the status quo and protect the rights of private property. The Supreme Court has literally issued that. They do not have a directive to serve and protect the people. They have no obligation to help anyone whatsoever over the requirements of a private citizen. They are here to maintain the status quo and protect private property. The police are doing exactly what they are here to do.
Well, when I talk about what they're supposed to do, is the idea of what they're supposed to do, not what the court says they're supposed to do.
Fair.
But the point I was making is I do think that as BLM continues to have success, as more people start to realize that what the defund the police movement is going for needs to happen, the negativity that police are already facing from what I think is currently a minority of the left is going to be bigger and bigger because more people are going to realize it needs to happen. And when I mean the pendulum's going to swing the opposite way, I don't mean that we're just going to abolish all police or anything like that. But all the perceived attacks that police are experiencing now are going to increase. And the point I was trying to get across is it needs to happen. All the negativity that the so-called good cops are experiencing right now from BLM and defund the police, that needs to happen. I'm sorry if it hurts you because you're a good cop and you're just trying to do your job. But this isn't about you, okay?
Oh, it's about them. I think it's absolutely about them.
You're actually in the minority on this conversation, Matt.
They are just as bad as all of the bad cops.
Yep.
Because they don't speak out about it.
The guy who drives the getaway car is part of the bank robbing team. He doesn't get a pass.
To all the so-called good cops out there, all right, all the negativity you guys have been experiencing because of this movement, it's not done. There's going to be more because this movement is growing. People are finally starting to listen. And what is now coming from what's currently a minority on the left is going to become mainstream. And all the criticisms you're hearing are going to get worse. And when that happens, you need to sit back and take it. Because everything that's going on right now, whether you want it or not, you are a part of it.
Yeah, this has been building for a very long time. We've had to deal with issues in American policing since the beginning of them, since police were first created out of slave patrols and have simply become the protectors of private property. The police no longer have a mandate to protect anyone. The Supreme Court has absolutely ruled that police have no requirement above a private citizen to give a shit or protect any human being whatsoever. They are here to maintain the status quo. They are here to protect private property. That is what needs to change. I don't want to see people just hating police and police hating people back. That doesn't solve anything. I want the police absolutely defunded and, in all honesty, some form of halfway abolishment. We need to completely tear down our police infrastructure in this nation and rebuild it into a system that actually serves the people. But if it only serves some people, because historically throughout America, the police have been here to beat and arrest gay people, beat and arrest people of color, destroy unions, destroy working class movements. That's what they do. And now, when they murder black people in the street and get caught on camera, they go on crybaby, pouty, tirades on the news at their police unions, scream about qualified immunity and wear t-shirts that say "I can breathe" and "Blue Lives Matter." They mock their own crimes. And that needs to change. And it's a cultural shift. And I think what you're saying may hold true, that maybe that will lead to that. But it needs drastic change.
Yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen, to be quite honest. I don't think that the swing is going to happen like you do, Matt. I think that there are 74 million Americans that voted for Donald Trump, and I think that all of them deify the police, the military, and all of that, because they're the ones that are flying the Blue Lives Matter flags, the or the thin blue line American flag. You know, I just don't see it happening the way you see it happening. And I don't think that there are as many quote unquote good cops because, they're complicit. And we said before, if you're the getaway driver, you're just as culpable as the guy inside the bank. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's a fair point. And here's the thing. One of my, you can call this faults, or you can call it a benefit. I always strive for the hopeful option. I always want us as a society to do better and be better. And I always hope that when I see what appear to be gains in movements like BLM, that it means that we are getting to that point. I tend to look at I tend to be the more optimistic on that point. That's what I look for. That's what I hope for. And that's what I want. And I agree. It in the face of everything you just mentioned and so much more, it sometimes gets hard to feel that way. Sometimes you look at all these news stories and you're just like, fuck, man, when are we just going to get it?
We get downtrodden all the time, or I get downtrodden all the time looking at these news stories and seeing these kinds of things happen. I am also hopeful, but I'm also a realist. I also understand that there's a lot of people in this country that don't want this type of thing to happen.
Well, and real quick, let's also point out that it doesn't have to be not hopeful to be outraged. Again, I disagree with your statement of the good cops, because you're either the vast minority of police that are brutally murdering people, or you're the vast majority of police that are not murderers. You just cover up their crimes and support them. You're culpable. However, and as outraged I am that Breonna Taylor was murdered by police who just wanted to kill people, because that's exactly what happened. They had a no-knock warrant for a house after the person they were looking for had already been convicted. And then they shot a guy after not establishing who they were, and then killed his fiance sleeping in her bed. These people knelt on George Floyd's neck, and the guy who did it was surrounded by other police who did nothing. Did they step on someone's neck? Nope. They did not commit murder.
But they sure as hell didn't stop it.
They were sure as hell accomplices to it. And that's the problem. But again, I don't see that as pessimistic. I'm outraged by it. Just like you said earlier, we need to remember these shitheads' names. We also need to remember the victims' names. And it's just like you said. And it's important. But that's part of the optimism. We need outrage. We need this to change. We need drastic deconstruction of the authority base in this nation. And that's, I don't know, for me, I find it hopeful. I go to these protests, right? I bring soup for my family. I am active in this, and I'm mad as hell, but I'm hopeful because we can change it. Change isn't easy. Change is painful. It's not fun, but that's how we do it. And so I guess, that's how I shift my perspective to it is, I'm okay with the negativity if it leads to an eventual positivity. And that's whether you want to say that's how I sleep at night, or that's, how I justify it or whatever. But that's how I view it as optimism, is all of this has got to go somewhere good. And I'm at least going to fight like hell to make sure I at least do my part to push it in that direction. So what's your white guy takeaway for the day, Matt?
I think the biggest thing that we need to take away from this is that there is a not insignificant amount of this country that is actively pushing for a fascist dictatorship. They are getting more and more organized. Just because Trump is gone does not mean they are going to stop. And, we need to be ready for it. We need to be vigilant. Just because Biden is now in that seat does not mean everything that's been happening over the last 4 years is just going to stop. The key is that we need to keep fighting it, keep strong, keep united, and keep demanding that the people we elect to office serve us and not the people with the most money in this country.
What about you, Kay?
We can't, in this country, allow frivolous lawsuit for no reason. We can't have alternative facts. We can't have people presenting falsified documents, fraudulent documents to our federal government because they don't like the way that it went, because it didn't go the way that they wanted it to. We have to learn that the system is there, it works, kind of, and you don't get to just override it because you feel like it. And how about you, Chris? How do you feel about it? What's your white guy takeaway?
My takeaway is that, kind of like what you were saying, is even if things don't go your way, that doesn't mean they don't happen. And we need to watch out for this rise of right-wing terrorism that's about to happen. It's only going to get worse. Once Trump's out of office, if you think this guy's going to go away, you're dead wrong. There's a cult of personality surrounding him, and now he's going to have even more time. He's going to have lots of sleep and lots of Twitter time, and he's going to rally these fucking brown shirt, booted motherfuckers who are going to come around and terrorize our country. And we need to be vigilant against it. Joe Biden won the election. Fascism is still rising in this country. It changes nothing. We need to stay in the streets. We need to stay mobilized. We need to watch out for each other. And we need to keep these guys in check, because if we don't, they will take over.
Those were our white guy takeaways. To close things out here, as we always do, I'd like to remind everyone to give us a like, give us a follow. We've got a link tree in the description now, so you can find our podcast on any platform that hosts them. And then one last thing I want to add, we've actually been getting a little bit of feedback now from some of our listeners. So we're going to add this a little bit on the end here where we're going to give some shout outs. First, a couple of shout outs. We've had some engagement on Facebook. This is to Mike, to Drew, and to Floyd. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and thank you for commenting. To our Twitter followers, Podcast Bozo. They are a new follower of ours on Twitter. They've been absolutely great about retweeting us. They've got a podcast where it's a much lighter note than ours, but definitely something you guys should check out. They're a great group of guys, and you can find them on podcastbozo.com. Check their link in the description as well. Comments, anything that you guys can think of. Left, right, center, we don't care. We want to hear it. If you disagree with something, if you think we were wrong on something, hit us up and let us know, and we'll start addressing it here at the end of each episode.
So thanks again for being here with us, guys. We always appreciate you being part of our conversation. Every Monday, 8 a.m., our new episode drops, so we will see you here next week. And until then, remember, kids, the revolution is you.